Welcome to Mr. Haunt's dungeon, where the darkness comes alive. Dive into spine-chilling tales and eerie encounters that will keep you on the edge of your seat. If you love the thrill of a good scare, hit that subscribe button and join us for new frightening and true stories. Don't miss out. Fear awaits. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get to the story. When David suggested we spend the weekend at his uncle's old cabin, we all jumped at the chance. A few days away from the city sounded perfect. The cabin was nestled deep in the woods, far from the noise and stress of our daily lives. What we didn't know was that beneath the charming wooden structure lay a dark secret. It was a crisp autumn afternoon when we arrived at the cabin. The air was cool and fresh, and the forest was alive with the vibrant colors of fall. The cabin itself was quaint and rustic, with a wrap, a round porch and a stone chimney that promised cozy nights by the fire. David, Emily, Sarah, Mike, and I were all excited for a weekend of hiking, bonfires, and relaxation. We drove up the narrow, winding road that led to the cabin, the trees closing in around us as we ventured deeper into the forest. The sense of isolation was palpable, and we all felt a thrill of excitement at the prospect of being so far removed from civilization. When we finally pulled up to the cabin, we were struck by its idyllic setting. It stood in a small clearing, surrounded by towering pines and oaks, with a carpet of fallen leaves adding to its charm. As we unpacked and settled in, David mentioned the cabin's history. "My uncle bought this place a few years ago," he said. "He got it for a steal because of some local legend about it being built over an old cemetery." We laughed it off, thinking it was just one of those spooky tales people tell to keep outsiders away. None of us believed in ghosts or curses. We were here to have fun, and nothing was going to spoil our weekend. The first evening went exactly as planned. We sat around the fire, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. The laughter and warmth of the flames made us forget about the eerie legend. But as the fire died down and the night grew colder, an unsettling feeling crept over us. The forest, once alive with the sounds of nature, was now unnervingly silent. We shrugged it off and went to bed, but sleep did not come easily. I kept waking up to strange noises, whispers that seemed to come from the walls, faint footsteps on the wooden floorboards, and the sound of something scraping against the windows. Each time I got up to check, there was nothing there. The next morning, Emily looked pale and tired. "Did anyone else hear those noises last night?" she asked. We all nodded, exchanging uneasy glances. David tried to reassure us, saying it was probably just the old cabin settling or animals outside. Determined to enjoy our weekend, we set out on a hike. We were halfway through our second day when the first truly inexplicable thing happened. We were exploring a nearby grove when Emily, who had wandered off a little, called out to us. She had found something strange. Carved into a tree, a series of symbols that looked ancient and ominous. The carvings were deep and weathered, almost as if they had been there for centuries. They were unlike anything any of us had seen before, intricate and eerie, filled with shapes that seemed to writhe and twist in the dim light filtering through the canopy. "What do you think it means?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know, but it gives me the creeps," Mike replied, shivering despite the mild weather. David examined the symbols more closely, tracing them with his fingers. "It looks like some kind of ancient language or ritual markings, maybe something to do with the cemetery legend." Emily, feeling increasingly uneasy, suggested we head back to the cabin. We agreed, the earlier sense of adventure now replaced with a growing apprehension. As we headed back to the cabin, the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees. The sense of unease returned, stronger than before. By the time we reached the cabin, darkness had fallen, and the air was thick with an oppressive silence. That night, the paranormal activity intensified. It started with the sound of crying, soft, mournful wails that seemed to come from the ground beneath us. We all heard it, and it chilled us to the bone. David tried to brush it off as the wind, but none of us believed him. Suddenly, the cabin's lights flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. We fumbled for our flashlights and gathered in the living room, our hearts pounding with fear. The crying grew louder, and the air turned icy cold. Sarah screamed, pointing at the window. We turned to see a ghostly face pressed against the glass, its eyes empty and hollow. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, leaving us all shaken and terrified. "We need to leave," Mike said, his voice trembling. "Now." We grabbed our things and rushed to the door, but it wouldn't budge. It felt as if an invisible force was holding it shut. Panic set in as we realized we were trapped. The crying was now all around us, joined by whispers and laughter, an eerie, disembodied chorus that filled the cabin. Objects began to move on their own, chairs slid across the floor, and pictures fell from the walls. The air was thick with malevolent energy, and we could feel it pressing in on us, threatening to suffocate us. Desperate to escape, we tried the windows, but they too were sealed shut by some unseen force. The temperature continued to drop, and we could see our breath in the air. Shadows moved in the corners of our vision, and we felt cold, clammy hands brushing against our skin. In the midst of the chaos, David remembered his uncle's journal, which he had found in a drawer earlier. "There might be something in here that can help us," he said, flipping through the pages. The journal was filled with accounts of strange occurrences and hauntings. David's uncle had written about the ancient cemetery, warning anyone who stayed at the cabin to respect the spirits and never disturb the ground beneath it. Desperation led us to the basement, where David's uncle had mentioned an old trapdoor. We found it hidden under a rug, covered in dust and cobwebs. With trembling hands, David opened the trapdoor, revealing a set of stairs leading down into the darkness. Armed with our flashlights, we descended into the basement. The air was damp and musty, and the walls were lined with ancient headstones, their inscriptions worn and faded. It was clear now that the cabin had been built directly over the cemetery. As we explored the basement, we found a small altar adorned with candles and strange symbols. It was a place of dark rituals, used to communicate with the dead. David's uncle had tried to appease the spirits, but it seemed his efforts had only angered them. Suddenly, the ground beneath us began to shake, and the whispers turned into screams. The spirits were enraged, and their fury was directed at us. We had to find a way to calm them, or we would not make it out alive. In a desperate attempt to appease the spirits, we lit the candles on the altar and recited the words written in the journal. The ground shook violently, and the air grew colder, but the screams began to subside. We could feel the oppressive energy lifting, and the temperature slowly returned to normal. We hurried back upstairs, hoping the ritual had worked. The cabin was silent now, the malevolent presence seemingly gone. We tried the door, and this time it opened easily. Without a second thought, we rushed outside, eager to put as much distance between us and the cabin as possible. As we drove away, we looked back one last time. The cabin stood silent and still, a dark silhouette against the night sky. We vowed never to return, and to warn others of the dangers that lurked there. The memory of that weekend haunts us still, a chilling reminder of the darkness that lies just beneath the surface of the familiar. We learned that some places are best left undisturbed, and that the dead should be left to rest in peace.